Over 2,000 years ago, the roar of the crowds filled colossal arenas. Blood, honor, and power intertwined in every combat. Some sought glory, others just to survive. But what's the truth behind it all? Today, we'll reveal the secrets that popular history hides and put the myths about gladiators to the test. Let's start with the most famous one, the fight to the death. Hollywood has made us believe that every gladiator fight ended with one of the two dying in front of the crowd. But that's a huge exaggeration. In reality, most fights were not to the death. Training a gladiator cost a fortune, and owners weren't willing to lose their investment in every fight. Many matches ended when one of the fighters was injured or surrendered, and the referee, along with his assistant, could stop the fight and decide, according to the rules, whether the combatant should be granted mercy or not. The second myth takes us to the heart of how we imagine the life of gladiators, the myth that they were all slaves. Many think all gladiators were slaves forced to fight, but the reality was more complex. While there were indeed slaves, there were also men who volunteered, seeking fame, money, or prestige. Some even signed professional contracts and could choose their school or trainer. Far from being mere victims, many gladiators were athletes and celebrities of their time, admired by the public and sponsored by the rich and powerful. Another famous myth comes straight from movies and TV, where we all imagine the emperor had absolute power over life and death in the arena. It's believed that a simple gesture of the emperor's thumb decided if a gladiator lived or died, but that's a modern myth. Historians aren't sure how mercy or condemnation was actually signaled in the Roman arena. What we do know is that the decision could depend on the organizer of the games, the referees, and sometimes even the audience, and not on a single dramatic gesture as movies show. So far we've talked about the male gladiators we all imagine, but the arena held secrets few know. Let's move on to the fourth myth, which claims there were only male fighters. Although most were men, there were also female gladiators, known as gladiatrices. They were much rarer and their fights were exceptional, but there is archaeological evidence and inscriptions that mention them. These women fought in the arena, trained and under rules similar to those of men, and in some cases became so famous that their names were preserved in historical records.
We reach the fifth myth, the Roman circus.
Although many believe that the fights were solely to entertain the masses, the reality was more complex. The games also had political and economic purposes. They served to demonstrate the emperor's power, maintain control over the population, and promote the wealth of the organizers. The sixth myth, no less surprising, shows that the gladiator arena was not limited to Rome. Although we usually associate gladiator fights only with the Colosseum in Rome, the reality was different. Similar spectacles were organized in various cities across the Roman Empire, such as Londinium, modern London, Pompeii, Jerash, in present-day Jordan, and Vienna, ancient Vindobona. The most renowned gladiators were brought to these cities to showcase their skill and fame, solidifying their status beyond the capital. The seventh myth challenges our view of gladiators. Not all fights were between strong adult men. The reality is that not all gladiators were invincible supermen. There were young, older, and even fighters with chronic injuries who continued fighting for contracts or money. The diversity of bodies in the arena was much greater than we usually imagine, and this shows that fame and skill were not always tied to brute strength or the perfect age. The eighth myth leads us to the legendary, the idea that gladiators constantly rebelled. We've all heard of Spartacus and his legendary rebellion, but the truth is that most gladiators did not revolt. Spartacus' rebellion was a historical exception, not the rule. Life in gladiator schools was strictly controlled, and the vast majority followed the rules, fought for fame, money, or freedom, and did not openly challenge Roman authority. Spartacus became a myth because he broke all the rules, but the real history of the arena was much quieter and less chaotic than we think. The ninth myth completely changes what we thought about gladiators. The fights were not as chaotic as we usually imagine.
In movies, it all seems like total chaos, screams, blood, and uncontrolled blows.
But as we mentioned briefly before, the matches were regulated. In the arena, there were referees, known as Summa Rudis and Secunda Rudis, who controlled the fight with a wooden rod, the rudis, ensuring the rules were followed and stopping the fight if one of the fighters fell or surrendered. Rome could be brutal, yes, but also incredibly organized. And to close our top 10, we discover that gladiators were much more than fighters. Many led double lives. Beyond the bloody fights, some gladiators were genuine celebrities of the Roman Empire. They took part in exhibitions, ceremonies, and theatrical performances, and their image was used in propaganda, everyday objects, and even political events. The arena was just one part of their life. Outside it, their fame and talent granted them power, influence, and admiration. Thus, the figure of the gladiator rose from mere fighter to cultural and social icon, leaving a mark that went beyond any combat. After uncovering the truth behind these myths, it's clear that gladiators were much more than popular history has told us. Next time you think of them, remember, legend and reality don't always match, and behind every myth is a story worth knowing.